Hey everyone, ready to dive in? We've got a fascinating topic today, all about human growth and development.
Sounds exciting.
It really is, especially since, well, this one's coming straight from one of our listeners. They sent in their notes from, get this, a student nurse's PowerPoint presentation on human growth and development.
Oh, I love that. Talk about real-world application. It'll be interesting to see how those academic insights play out.
Exactly. And they definitely don't disappoint. Like right off the bat, the presentation emphasizes that human development is continuous.
Music to my ears. We hear it all the time, right? What's the one thing that changes everything? But human development, it's not about that one magical moment. It's about the whole journey.
Right. Like, sorry to break it to you, you don't just turn 18 and poof, you're an adult.
Yeah.
It's this constant evolution. And get this, it starts even before we're born.
Precisely. It's that ongoing process from a single cell to, well, the complex beings we become.
And speaking of complex, the presentation lays out those major stages we all go through, like, prenatal, newborn, infancy, childhood, the whole shebang.
Ah, the circle of life. And it's more than just a timeline, right? Each stage, it's like a unique chapter in the human story. And understanding those chapters, well, that's huge, especially in fields like nursing, where you're meeting people at different points in their own stories.
Totally. Knowing what's typical, what to expect. It's like having a guidebook, right?
Yeah.
But hold on. Before we get ahead of ourselves, the presentation jumps into the get this, principles of development, and some of these names, there's something else.
Oh, I love a good jargon-filled deep dive. Don't worry, we'll break it down, make it crystal clear for everyone. It's all about making these concepts accessible.
Exactly. So first up, cephalocaudal. Sounds kind of intimidating, but it's actually pretty straightforward.
Yeah, once you decode it, cephalocaudal simply means development that goes from head to toe. Like, think about it, babies. They can control their heads before they can even sit up.
It's true.
It's like building a house. Gotta start with a strong foundation, right? Or in this case, a strong head.
And then there's proxima distal. Now that one sounds like a mouthful.
It's all Greek to me. Or maybe Latin. Either way, it means we develop from the inside out.
Makes sense when you think about it.
Exactly. Imagine a tree growing. First, you've got the trunk, solid and strong. Then branches start reaching out, exploring, and finally the leaves come in. Our spines develop before our fingers, which makes total sense.
Imagine trying to do anything with your hands when your spine's all wobbly, recipe for disaster.
Exactly. And it's not just physical development either. Our brains are thinking it follows that simple to complex pattern too.
Oh, absolutely. The presentation really dives into that. Like a baby's first interaction with the world, it might be just grasping, right?
Mm.
But over time, those little hands, they're building, they're creating, they're solving problems.
It's like they're literally building their world, piece by piece, starting with those basic blocks.
So cool. Okay, next principle, continuous. This one really hit home for me. It's like, yeah, we talk about stages, but it's not like there's a pause button, right? It's constant, this flow of development.
It's like a river, right? Always moving. Sometimes it's a rushing current, sometimes it's a gentle flow, but it's constantly shaping the landscape as it goes.
Love that analogy. Okay, last principle, general to specific. It's like we develop those big muscle movements, those gross motor skills, before the fine-tuned ones.
Which explains why toddlers can run around like crazy but still struggle with buttons.
Tell me about it. My niece, she's 2, and she's a pro at climbing on everything, but ask her to hold a crayon.
It's all part of the process. And this principle, it applies beyond the physical stuff too. Think about how kids learn big concepts first, then the details.
Well, totally. Like every animal's a dog at first,
That's
right?
right.
And then slowly they start to differentiate cats, cows, giraffes, the whole animal kingdom.
It's about building those categories, those mental models of the world, and then refining them as they gather more experiences.
Like to appreciate how amazing this whole process is. But the presentation makes a really important point here, and it's about individuality.
Yes. Thank goodness for that, right? Imagine if we all hit puberty at the exact same time. Talk about awkward.
Seriously. But on a more serious note, that individuality is huge, right? Especially for folks going into healthcare, like our listener who sent this in.
Absolutely. Recognizing that everyone has their own pace, their own unique journey that's fundamental to providing compassionate and effective care.
Okay, so we've got the roadmap, those major stages, and we've got those guiding principles, those big ideas that shape how we grow and develop.
So what comes next? Time to hit the road and see those principles in action.
You read my mind. Let's start at the very beginning, before birth even happens. The presentation dives into prenatal development, which, get this, lasts an average of 38 to 40 weeks.
It's mind-blowing, right? In that relatively short amount of time, a single cell transforms into a fully formed human being, ready to enter the world.
And speaking of entering the world, a presentation highlights this scoring system used right after a baby is born, the APGAR score. Since you're in healthcare, I bet you know this one like the back of your hand.
Oh, absolutely. The APGAR score, it's like the first impression, right? It gives us a snapshot of how well the baby is doing in those first few moments after birth.
So break it down for us. What exactly does the APGAR score measure?
So it focuses on 5 key things: the baby's color, their heart rate, their reflexes like, are they responding to stimulation, their muscle tone, and how well they're breathing. And each of those things, it gets a score from 0 to 2, with 2 being the best, healthiest sign.
So like a perfect 10 would be the ultimate goal, like nailing a gymnastics routine.
Exactly. A perfect 10 means the baby's rocking it, transitioning beautifully to life outside the womb.
But a lower score doesn't automatically mean something seriously wrong.
Right. It just means
Yeah.
we need to pay a little closer attention. Maybe the baby needs a little help with their breathing. Maybe they just need a little more time to adjust, especially if it was a difficult labor.
Makes sense. So it's about looking at the whole picture, not just a single number.
Absolutely. The APGAR score, it's a tool, a really important one, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. It helps us figure out if the baby needs any immediate support.
And that's where those amazing nursing skills come in, right?
You got it. Depending on the APGAR score, and of course the baby's individual needs, nurses might provide little extra oxygen, gently stimulate the baby to encourage breathing, or keep a close eye on their vital signs.
Wow. Talk about being in the right place at the right time. Nurses truly are incredible.
They really are. Okay, so we've covered prenatal development, that whirlwind entrance into the world. Are we
L-
ready for the next adventure?
Let's do it. And I think it's time we talk about those toddlers.
Ah, toddlers. The presentation calls it a time of great physical, cognitive, and psychosocial development. And believe me, they are not exaggerating.
There's a reason why those years are both hilarious and exhausting for anyone who spends time with a toddler.
And messy. Don't forget messy. But in all seriousness, toddlers, they're like little sponges soaking up every bit of information, every new experience.
And testing every boundary along the way, am I right?
Oh, absolutely. There's a reason why the terrible twos are a thing, even though terrible might be a bit of an exaggeration.
Just a tad.
Yeah.
But seriously, what is it about that age that makes them want to climb on everything, touch everything, and say no to everything?
Remember that simple to complex principle we talked about earlier? Toddlers, they're putting it into action. They're testing, experimenting, trying to figure out how everything works.
Their little brains are working overtime. And according to this presentation, toddlerhood lasts from around 12 to 36 months.
That's a lot of time for exploration, and let's be honest, a fair amount of chaos, too.
But it's all part of the learning process, right? Those temper tantrums, the constant need for attention. It's all about them figuring out who they are and how they fit into the world.
Exactly. Toddlerhood is about pushing boundaries, testing limits, and developing that sense of independence. It's a vital stage for those social emotional skills that lay the groundwork for everything that comes next.
Speaking of everything that comes next, we can't forget about adolescence. I mean, talk about a time of dramatic transformation.
Dramatic is putting it mildly. We're talking physical changes, hormonal shifts, brains going into overdrive. It's a lot to handle, both for the adolescents themselves and for everyone around them.
No kidding. I still remember those years, the emotional roller coaster, the feeling like everything was the end of the world if it didn't go your way.
It's a time of self-discovery, right? They're trying to figure out who they are, what they believe in, where they fit in the world, all while their bodies and brains are doing this massive growth spurt.
And the presentation highlights that even though most of our physical growth is done by our early 20s, our brains, they keep developing until around age 25.
Isn't that wild? We think of adulthood as this finished product, but really our brains are still under construction, especially those areas responsible for decision-making, impulse control, planning for the future.
Which might explain some of those, shall we say, questionable choices we make in our early 20s.
Hey, we've all been there. It's all part of the journey, right? Testing boundaries, figuring out what works, what doesn't.
True that. And the presentation doesn't shy away from the fact that this period, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. They talk about things like substance use, unplanned pregnancies, mental health challenges. It's a lot to navigate.
It's a time of both immense opportunity and vulnerability, which is why having a strong support system, family, friends, mentors, healthcare providers, it can make all the difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so from those exciting, sometimes turbulent young adult years, we transition into middle adulthood. which the presentation defines as ages 35 to 65.
The years when, for many people, life really starts to take shape. Careers, families, those long-term goals start coming into focus.
And so do some of those more visible signs of aging, right? The presentation gets into some of the physical changes that start happening during this stage.
It's natural. Our bodies change as we get older. It's all part of the process.
The presentation mentions things like changes in skin elasticity, hair color, even a decrease in height. I have to admit, some of those sound a bit daunting.
I hear you. But it's about reframing how we think about aging. These changes, they're not something to be afraid of. They're just a natural part of life.
It's all about perspective.
Exactly. And it's not just about the outward appearance either, right? There are significant biological shifts happening too. The presentation talks about climacteric, which is this major transition that happens in middle adulthood.
Climacteric. That's a new one on me.
Don't worry, we'll break it down. Basically, it looks different for men and women. For women, climacteric is often synonymous with menopause, which, as we know, comes with a whole wave of hormonal changes.
Makes sense. So what about for men? Is there a male equivalent of menopause?
Not exactly a single event like menopause, but men do experience a gradual decline in testosterone production, which can also lead to physical and emotional changes.
It sounds like middle adulthood is a time of, shall we say, adjustments.
Adjustments, transitions, reinventions, it can be a lot.
Okay.
But it's also a time when many people feel like they're hitting their stride. They've got this wealth of experience to draw on. They're often more comfortable in their own skin.
I love that. So it's not all downhill from here.
Not at all. It's about embracing the changes, celebrating the wisdom that comes with age, and recognizing that every stage has its own beauty and its own challenges.
Well said. Speaking of a stage with its own unique beauty and challenges, let's talk about the final stage outlined in this presentation, older adulthood.
The stage that often gets the least amount of attention, but in reality, it's a time of incredible resilience and richness.
The presentation starts off strong with a pretty eye-opening statistic. Individuals over 65, they make up the fastest growing age group in the United States.
Wow, that's significant, and it really highlights how important it is to create societies that value and support our aging population.
So important. Now, for someone going into a healthcare field like nursing, what are some key things to keep in mind about this stage of life?
Well, first and foremost, we can't make assumptions about what it means to be old. Everyone ages differently, and someone's age doesn't tell the whole story.
Right, like you can't just lump all 65-year-olds together and assume they'll have the same needs or abilities.
Exactly. You might have a 65-year-old who's running marathons and another who needs help with daily tasks. It's all about individual assessment and personalized care.
And the presentation really stresses that for older adults, healthcare should focus on promoting independence and quality of life.
Absolutely. It's about creating environments and providing resources that allow older adults to thrive. That might mean fall prevention strategies at home, medication management, connecting them with social activities to combat loneliness.
It's about empowering them to live their best lives, whatever that looks like for them.
You said it. And that requires us to shift our perspective. Instead of focusing on what people lose as they age, let's celebrate the wisdom, the experience, the resilience that older adults bring to the table.
I love that shift in thinking. Okay, so we've just taken this incredible journey through the entire human lifespan from those first prenatal flutters to the wisdom of our older years.
Talk about a whirlwind tour. It's amazing how much ground we've covered, but in reality, we've just scratched the surface.
Barely dipped our toes in. There's always more to learn, more to explore, especially when it comes to understanding those big-name theories of human development.
Oh, yes, the theories, those frameworks that help us make sense of it all. We
Yeah.
can't talk about human development without mentioning the giants, right?
Exactly. Freud, Erikson, Piaget, Kohlberg. These are the names that shape the field.
Their work, it's fascinating, groundbreaking, and sometimes a little controversial.
We'll dive into the nitty-gritty of their theories, but for now, we're going to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And we're back, folks. Still swimming in the sea of human growth and development. Before the break, remember that nursing quiz question, the one about how our bodies change as we get older.
It was a good one. Really makes
Uh,
you think about aging in a practical, on the ground way.
Exactly. So, for everyone who might not remember, the question was, a nurse is teaching a class about, get this, expected physiological changes in older adult clients. Which of these changes should the nurse include? And the options were a drop in systolic blood pressure, an increase in the gag reflex, more muscle mass, or less body fat.
And as you were saying, not all changes that happen with age are like inevitable or universal, right?
Exactly. So what is the answer? Which change should that nurse be teaching about?
All right, drum roll. It's a decrease in body fat. Option D.
Makes sense when you put it that way. But why is that so important for nurses to get? I always thought we lost muscle and gained fat as we age. You know, the old metabolism slowing down thing.
You're not wrong. That often happens. But see, this question, it's sneaky. It's about what's expected physiologically. And losing some body fat, it's something nurses should be prepared for in older adults.
See, it's not just about looks. It's about really knowing how to care for someone as they age.
Bingo. Because less body fat, especially alongside muscle loss, which often happens together, it impacts everything. Their nutrition, how they move around, even their risk for other health issues.
Wow, I didn't think about it like that.
Yeah.
So knowing this, what does a nurse do differently?
Imagine you're working with an older patient, right? And they're losing weight without trying, or their muscles feel weak. Knowing that body fat decrease is expected, it helps you connect the dots.
Instead of just be like, oh, they're getting older, what can you do?
Exactly. You dig deeper. Maybe they need help with their diet, maybe some targeted exercises to build strength back up, maybe just some good old-fashioned education to make healthy choices.
That's like human development knowledge. It's not just something you learn in a textbook. It changes how you approach each person.
100%. It's about taking those facts and turning them into better care, better outcomes for the patient.
Okay, we crushed that nursing challenge. I'm ready for some theory now. Those big names we teased before the break. Freud, Erickson, bring them on.
Get ready for some serious brain food, because we're about to dive into the minds that revolutionized how we understand human development, starting with the one and only Sigmund Freud.
Freud. His theories are a wild ride,
Yeah,
but super influential.
to say the least. Okay, so the presentation, it quotes one of his key ideas. Freudian theories suggest that our adult personalities are shaped by how we navigate those early childhood experiences.
Heavy stuff, right?
It makes you wonder, is our childhood destiny? Are we stuck with whatever happened way back when?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, it's one psychologists are still debating. Freud's theories, as groundbreaking as they were, they've gotten both praise and pushback over the years.
It's not that simple.
Not even close. Look, early experiences, they matter. They lay a foundation. But to say they determine our entire adult lives, that's a bit extreme. Thank goodness for that. So it's more like those early years, they give you the building blocks, but you get to choose how you build your life.
Right, now you're getting it. Our genes, our choices as we grow up, the experiences we have, they all shape who we become, not just our childhoods.
Okay, that's reassuring. What about Erickson then? He seems a bit more, I don't know, user-friendly than Freud, especially for someone going into nursing.
Oh, for sure. Erickson's theory is all about lifespan development. He believed that our social and emotional growth, it doesn't just stop in childhood, it's a lifelong journey.
So no matter how old we get, there's always room to learn and grow.
Absolutely. Erickson's theory, it breaks down our lives into 8 stages, from babyhood to those wise older years. And each stage, it comes with its own unique challenges.
Like levels in a video game, but instead of defeating bosses, you're figuring out life.
I like that analogy. And Erickson called those challenges psychosocial crises. He believed that how we deal with them at each stage, it shapes who we become and how we see ourselves in the world.
Could you give us an example? I'm having a hard time picturing these crises.
Sure. Let's talk about teenagers. They're dealing with what Erickson called identity versus role confusion. Trying to figure out who they are, what they believe in, what they want to do with their lives. It's a lot.
Oof, yeah, that brings back memories. I remember feeling so lost and confused at that age.
And that's totally normal. It's all part of the process. Erickson believed that by going through these identity struggles, questioning, exploring different paths, that's how teenagers eventually build a strong sense of self.
It's like they're trying on different hats, different versions of themselves, until they find one that fits just right.
Exactly. Now, how does this connect back to nursing? Well, it's all about understanding where your patient is at developmentally.
So, you wouldn't treat a teenager the same way you treat a toddler or an 80-year-old.
Exactly. If you're caring for a young adult who's feeling lost and uncertain about their future, knowing they're in that identity versus role confusion stage, it helps you approach them with empathy and understanding.
So you're not just treating their symptoms, you're treating the whole person, taking into account where they're at in their life journey.
Bingo. It's about recognizing that our physical health, our mental health, our social and emotional well-being, they're all interconnected. And by understanding those connections, we can provide more holistic and effective care.
This is blowing my mind. We got to take a quick pause, but when we come back, we'll wrap up this incredible journey through the world of human growth and development. Stay tuned. And we're back. We've almost reached the end of our deep dive into human growth and development. It's incredible how much we've unpacked, right?
It really shows you how much goes into becoming who we are, From those very first cells dividing to figuring out life as adults, it just keeps going.
It really does. Okay, so before we wrap up this amazing conversation, I was thinking, you know how we always leave our listeners with something to ponder? A final thought.
Love those. What have you got for us today?
Well, we've talked about those stages, those theories, all those big ideas. But what if, like, instead of seeing it all as this straight line, you know, like you're born, you grow up, that's the path. What if we saw it more as this chance to always be learning?
Ooh, I like where you're going with this. It's that growth mindset, right? Not just for kids in school, but for like all of us throughout our lives.
Exactly. Because things change, right?
Yeah.
We change. Instead of being scared of that, what if we got curious about it? Each new stage, it's not an ending, it's like this whole new adventure starting.
It's like that saying, the only constant is change. And honestly, that's kind of freeing, isn't it? We don't have to have it all figured out because who we are, what we need, it's going to keep evolving anyway.
And especially for someone going into healthcare, like our listener here, being able to roll with those changes, to see each patient as this like work in progress in the best way possible.
It's essential because you're not treating a diagnosis, you're treating a person.
Mm.
And that person, they're on their own unique timeline, their own growth journey.
And that journey, it doesn't end until, well, it ends. But until then, it's all about learning, growing, connecting with each other.
Beautifully said. I think that's the perfect note to end on.
I think so too. So, to everyone listening, thank you for diving deep with us today. We hope you've learned something new, maybe gained a new perspective on this whole wild ride we call human development.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
Until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep those brains buzzing. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.